This episode of the Capsule in Conversation is brought to you by Harrogate Springwater. Famous for its waters since 1571, Harrogate is Britain's premium natural source water. Hello, you are listening to the Capsule in Conversation podcast. I'm Natalie Anderson, and today I'm joined by Gosia Bowling, National Lead for Mental Health at the UK's largest healthcare charity, Nuffield Health, to talk mental health and the menopause, managing anxiety, and how to prevent burnout. So sit back, relax, and get ready to join us in our conversation. Hello all, I hope you're all well. As we edge closer to the last month of the year, I know many of us feel fatigued, overworked and overwhelmed. And with Christmas on the horizon, protecting our mental well-being is essential. Well, thankfully, my special guest today is one of the leading voices in this area. A BABCP accredited cognitive behavioural therapist, she has over 25 years working experience in mental health and helping individuals and groups overcome emotional difficulties. She's also an EMDR UK and Europe accredited psychotherapist and a fellow of the Higher Education Academy, having worked as a senior lecturer in UK universities, leading programs and delivering training in counselling and psychotherapy. She's the national lead for mental health at Nuffield Health, and she joins me today. It's the brilliant Gosia Bowling. Hi, Gosia.
Hello, Natalie. Thank you. What an introduction.
Well, you have all these amazing credits. You know, this is your specialist subject. You're amazing, and thank you so much for joining me today. It's lovely to have you with me.
Thank you so much for having me, Natalie. It's really funny when you talk about me being in, having worked in mental health for 25 years. It sounds such a long time, but I'm still just as passionate about it as I was, I think, at the start of my career, at the start of my training. It was something that I thought, wow, this is for me. This is my life. This is what I'm really interested in. And that hasn't stopped. So I'm really looking forward to our conversation today.
And I expect as well, when you started work, 25 years ago, the landscape was very different. It wasn't what it is now.
Massively different. The way that we talk about mental health has changed hugely. I mean, it's changed just in the last couple of years, hasn't it, since the pandemic, from being something that we don't talk about, from something that's hidden in the shadows, something that's really stigmatized, to something that we are now becoming more comfortable talking about. I wouldn't say that we're there yet. I would say that there's places where we're talking about it, places where we're having conversations like this today, but that hasn't always translated into conversations that lead to sort of meaningful change or meaningful action. So it's important that we keep doing it, that we keep making progress, because we all have it. We all have mental health.
Well, that's it. And I think, now, as I said at the top, Nuffield Health is the UK's largest healthcare charity. It was established in 1957, and the charity operates 31 health hospitals and 114 health, fitness and wellbeing centres. And the thing that I love is, the ethos is that the best healthcare should help prevent illness by looking after your mind and your body. And that's the connection, isn't it? That's something that's so important, and that people, I think, in previous generations have tended to forget. They've concentrated on the body, but not so much the mind-body connection. Would you agree?
Yeah, I'm so pleased to hear you talking about it like that. And so often, and the history of why mind and body has been separated is really interesting. That's a whole other podcast that goes back to religion and science and how things developed. But we've had this divide, but it really is an artificial divide, because we know that when we have a healthy body, we're far more likely to have a healthy mind, and vice versa. If you've got a long-term physical health condition, you're 2 to 3 times more likely to have a mental health condition, and vice versa. If you've got a mental health condition, you're much more likely to experience physical ill health. So we've got to look more holistically. We've got to look at how they work together rather than seeing them as very, very separate things. I think we've got a better awareness of what physical fitness is and feels like. So when we talk about physical fitness, we know what that means, don't we?
Yeah.
If I was to say to you, what does it mean to be physically fit? You'd probably be able to tell me quite a lot about that. Whether you're fit or not, you'd be able to explain it, and I'm sure listeners would have a sense. But when we talk about mental health and what does mental health mean to you, the words and images that start coming to mind are usually those associated with ill health. People start to think about stress, anxiety, depression. We don't often think about, well, what does what does mental fitness look like? What does mental health really look like? Because when we talk about mental health, and we have come a long way, but we're still often talking about what mental ill health is, rather than looking at it across the whole continuum.
And I think that's really interesting what you just said then about, mental ill health as opposed to promoting just maintenance, like maintaining positive mental health, and how, we talk about like the gut being the second brain, and that being completely interlinked within our body and the organs within our body. And obviously our brain is this huge like organ, this mass it is part of kind of our everyday living, and to ignore it is quite foolish, really. And I suppose, when you break it down to the biology of it, then it really makes sense. But because we're there going about our daily business and we don't give it as much attention, and, particularly in what we've just gone through in the last 2 years, and even the last 6 months, two in this country, 3 prime ministers, the death of the Queen, all of the pandemic, it's these shifting phases have huge effects on our psyche, don't they? And even if you're a person that's kind of not into mental health, so to speak, because there are many people still like that around, you have to kind of be aware of how these external influences are affecting us, don't we?
No, totally. And a lot of time we think that, mental health or mental ill health is something that's due to the person. And there's this idea, this wrong idea, this myth that if you're experiencing mental ill health, depression, anxiety, there's something wrong with you, that it's a weakness, that it's some sort of, failing on your part. And I think that's why there's been this massive reluctance to talk about it in recent years. But actually, we're hugely influenced by what's happening around us. We experiencing a reaction to the world is perfectly normal, it's perfectly natural, and it's perfectly healthy. And actually, you wouldn't be a human if you weren't responding to, as you said, these huge issues. I mean, the way that we live, the way that we work, the way that we sort of learn and and react with each other, connect with each other, changed massively during the pandemic. So we experienced these, this stress that was prolonged. It went on for a long period of time. We had this uncertainty that went on for a long period of time. And now we're in another period of uncertainty. We've gone into a cost of living crisis. We've had a war in Europe that we're reminded of, that's on our doorstep. We're hearing, stories of suffering every day. And today in the news, we've got the COP27 summit, and we're talking about climate chaos and catastrophe. So it's natural that we're responding to the world that we live in, the environment that we live in, because we're not robots, we're human beings. And so experiencing a mood shift or anxiety or an emotional reaction to that is perfectly normal. It's what we do with that, I think, that is interesting, and how we manage that's really interesting.
Yeah, because we are living in a world that's never existed before. It's like the shift that we're in right now, even in the last 100 years, this is the most intense shift. We've got the tech revolution, we've got all of, like you've said, climate change, all of these worries, 24-hour rolling news. And as humans, we're not built for it yet anyway. We haven't evolved as quickly as everything else around us. So how do we, to be practical, how do we look after ourselves? How do we, when that feeling in your chest starts to rise, and I'm sure we've all had it, the panic, the adrenaline that's racing, how do we prevent ourselves from spiraling out of control, really? And how do we maintain positive mental health?
Yeah, it's a really important question. It's a huge question.
Yeah, I know.
I could talk about this for weeks, years, never mind just in our short session today. So I'm going to just try to distill a few nuggets. I think the first thing to say is actually, stress and that feeling of adrenaline and that sense that we get can be useful sometimes, because what it does is it can mobilize us to action. So when we're faced with a threat, that increased energy that we have, that increased sort of, that chemical change that we have can mobilize us to deal with that threat. The problem is when we're in that state for too long, when we're in that state for a prolonged period of time. And the problem is when we're doing that in response to sometimes what are perceived or imagined threats. So it's about being able to be really realistic about what we're facing and being able to sometimes pull it back to get a more rational view of things. So when we start to get anxious, we start to really imagine the worst case scenarios a lot of the time. So we live in a place called what if, and that what if consists of everything going wrong. So what if this happens? What if I can't do this? What if the worst case scenario happens? And our body is continually trying to prepare us to do that. The more we worry, the more our body reacts, and we can very quickly spiral out of control. It can lead to panic attacks, breathlessness, those real physiological symptoms. So what can be really helpful can be just to pause and just to breathe and just to try to stay in the present and try to think about whether the worry that we're having can be turned into something productive rather than unproductive. If we're just worrying nonstop and it's just going around in circles and we're worrying about every single eventuality that could go wrong, we're worrying about things that we have absolutely no control over, then it's going to be completely unhelpful. By pausing, stepping back, taking some moments to think about, actually, what can I change? What can I do? What can I do that actually can be helpful? We can look at how we work with our thoughts, with our actions, and those can all have a really big impact on how we regulate our emotions.
I know that when I was at my worst with my anxiety, really badly, and it was like out of a prolonged period of heightened anxiety just after I'd had my son. And I remember going, when I was traveling, it would take literally the smallest thing for me to be from 0 to 1,000 because I felt like I was already up here. And so what I used to do is I used to try and count. I used to try and find a way of moving my thoughts from the, like you said, the what if, what if this happens? Oh my gosh, the train doors have closed, to just counting in just up to 20 and then starting again, just to try and bring my adrenaline and my breath down.
It's really hard because once our body's in this threat mode, which is, we've all heard of it, haven't we? Fight or flight.
Yeah.
So our body prepares us for physical threat. It prepares us for danger. It prepares us to fight or run. And that's why it's such a strong physical reaction, so uncomfortable and actually really frightening, because it's designed to save your life. And actually, if your life was under threat, it would be so useful. But when you're sitting on a crowded train and you actually just want to go and do your Christmas shopping, or you're in a busy supermarket and it feels crowded, that reaction's actually really unhelpful, and it can spiral something in itself. So the key to that is being able to switch off that fight or flight response, to being able to sort of regain control of your physiology through pausing, through doing breathing exercises, through changing the way that we think, what we're telling ourselves, by changing the message from a danger message like you were doing, to let me just count, let me just pause, let me just take some moments and think about what's happening. So there's lots of things that we can say to ourselves. There's lots of things we can do within our body to change the way that we're breathing. But I think the important thing is we often don't look at these or explore these until we're already in a state of anxiety. We tend to seek psychological support or mental health support once we're already really anxious, actually, and I'm struggling to function in my daily life. I'm struggling to work. I'm struggling to kind of engage in what I need to do. I'm struggling to run my house and my family. So it's important that we can learn those skills earlier, and then they're more available to us. It's like anything else. If we know these basic skills of anxiety management, thought management, self-awareness, body management, we're in a state of stress, then it's going to be a lot easier to manage those situations that we'll all experience, because it's part of life. We can't not go through life without having anxiety.
And as you said then, especially physical, I know for myself, when I start to get a little bit snappy, that's the time for me to go for a run and use what I've got in my body, the whatever's happening, the chemical changes that are happening. I've started to become more aware of it now, rather than letting myself get to a point that's so bad and very difficult to come back from. And it is about that preservation, isn't it? And kind of recognizing and being aware. So, if someone's starting to kind of feel, because we'll talk about this in a second now, we're at this really funny period of time of the year as well, with the weather and the dark nights. But if someone is starting to kind of feel that slight overwhelm happening, what are the first things for them to be aware of to then take action?
If you're experiencing that anxiety and it's mainly a body reaction, then I would say start with the body, because we're all different. So I think what you said was spot on, Natalie, and that, you've got to know yourself. And we talk about recognizing your stress signature, and that's unique for all of us. For somebody, it could be actually they recognize it when they're emotional, they're tearful, they're snappy, they're angry, they're irritable. For other people, they only notice it, when their teeth are grinding, their fists are clenched, their heart's pounding, they're struggling to breathe. For other people, it's when they start, acting differently, they withdraw, they start to sort of really become frightened of seeing their friends again, and they change their behavior. So it's understanding your unique stress signature, because that's your clue as to where to start. And if you start as a physical change, then it's about managing that physical reaction. It's about looking at breathing exercises, muscle relaxation exercises, and lots of other resources like that. And again, look, if you go to our website, you can see lots of resources that can help you with that, and lots of activities and workouts that again can support with that physiology and gaining a control of that. If it's your thoughts, your worry's out of control and you can't stop worrying, and that worrying is just there continually, and it's interfering in your ability to do what you need to do and concentrate, then that's when you start. You can start by keeping a worry diary. You can start by learning to separate your thoughts from productive worry to unproductive worry. So worry that's actually worried about my finances, I'm worried about paying my bills, what if this happens, what if I can't do this, what if I can't do that. That worry just going around in circles is just going to fuel more anxiety. Whereas if you can channel that worry into, okay, I need to maybe ring the bank and get a sense of what's going on. Actually, I need to maybe speak to the Citizens Advice Bureau and really get a sense of maybe what benefits I'm entitled to, or what other support that's available, rather than letting those letters or, bills from the credit card company build up and worrying about them. It's opening them, speaking to those organizations, making a plan, turning that worry into action. So it's about your unique stress signature and doing what you need to do actually to make a change that's going to be a helpful change for you in those situations.
And I think something that you said then is being honest. It's like the honesty. There's the two things actually. One is honesty of like being honest with yourself, perhaps like opening up to a partner or family and even children, speaking to them and offloading some of that worry, and also the action of writing it down, of getting that worry out of you, just sitting in your head, so that you offload, you kind of take some of that stress away from you physically.
Yeah, massively. I mean, connecting with other people is probably the best thing that we can do for our mental health across everything that happens. So whether you're feeling, depressed or anxious, whether you're affected by, the seasons, whether you're financially worried, connecting with others, study after study after study has shown that has got a huge impact. It's a protective impact. We know that in every single natural disaster that's happened, afterwards, when they've done the research, the people that had stronger social connections, the people that had somewhere to go, somebody to talk to, other people to connect with, fared a lot better. They developed less PTSD, less depression, less anxiety. It's when we try to shoulder it on our own that things can build up. And then we can actually start to become really critical of ourselves. And then other factors come in. We start to become so critical that we start to shame ourselves, we start to berate ourselves, and that can exacerbate the problem even further.
I mean, that does actually lead me on nicely to something else. Actually, we'll come back to the seasons very soon. But, you know, I know, have kind of discovered in a lot of like the work that you do that actually with burnout in particular, women seem to be a lot more prone to this really than men because of I think it's the work that they take on at work, and then also taking on a lot of the household chores, family responsibilities, and, you know, leading that to what you just said then of then feeling guilty. You get the mum guilt, or you get, you know, even if you're looking after an older parent, you've got all this burden on your shoulders. And as women, we tend to kind of go down that rabbit hole quite quickly. I'm right in thinking that.
Yeah, I mean, burnout can affect everybody. You know, it's the World Health Organization has said it's a real threat to global health, and it's an occupational phenomenon, really. So it's when the demands placed upon us exceed our ability to cope with those demands. But the research that was done during the pandemic, you're right, Natalie, found that actually women shouldered a lot of other burdens in addition to having to be at work and everything that came with that. I think the research showed that they were 3 times more likely to do the unpaid childcare that was needed within a family, 5 times more likely to do the lion's share of all of the domestic chores. And then there's this other thing called psychological load, and that's the unpaid work that's all related to organising the household, you know, uniforms, school dinner money.
I'm so happy that you're saying this. It makes me feel seen.
Sleepovers, getting the costume ready. This needs to happen. It's a huge mental load. So you've got, you know, we organise our life at work, and that's hard enough. And, you know, we organise the day to day, but there's this thing called the mental load. And still there is, you know, the research does show that there is a gender imbalance in that mental load, that hidden psychological load that's associated with running a household. And yeah, it leads to all of those feelings that you talk about, feelings of failure and feelings of guilt. And this is so important because to me, it's what we can call the second arrow. And this is a really fantastic story from Eastern philosophy. And I think in times of stress and crisis, and we've got so much I know to talk about on the program today, but we know that life can be difficult and we know that life can be stressful. So life throws us the first arrow, whether that's, you know, a cost of living crisis or a pandemic or, you know, things going on in our relationship or home or worry about our children. So that's the first arrow. And that's hard enough, you know, that's hard enough to deal with. But then what we tend to do is we shoot a second arrow into that wound by how we talk to ourselves about it. So not only are we in a difficult situation, but then we start blaming ourselves. You're useless. You're a failure. You can't even support your family. You know, you can't do anything right. We're not looking at everything we have done. We're not looking at, you know, all the things that we've achieved. We're constantly then looking at our failures and shooting a second arrow into a wound that's already deep enough, that's already causing enough pain. So thinking about actually how we can be kind to ourselves, what we can do to be constructive in that, looking at a support strategy that works for us, whether that's, as you said, you know, taking advantage of the benefits of exercising from mental health, you know, recognizing that really strong link, recognizing that, you know, when we take time out for ourselves, when we spend a bit of time on that self-care, that's not being selfish, that's not being a bad mother or somebody that is not taking care of their family. That's doing something essential that's actually going to be really helpful and actually put you in a much better place.
It's conditioning as well, I think. You know, we've got to kind of undo a lot of preconceived ideas about the role of women and the role of men. And obviously, and I know we are making major changes, but there's still a lot that needs to be done. I know in our house, I've had really open conversations with my husband because I do it. I can't help it. If I want something done, I'll do it myself because I'm like, oh, that's going to take you ages. And I might as well just do it myself because I'll just get it done quicker. So in a lot of ways, I put that burden on myself. Like he hasn't asked me to do it. I've just decided to do it because I can organise it much quicker and much better. That's what I've chosen to put on my shoulders. But it's about being honest and saying, actually, I can't do all that and be present and be a good mum, a good wife and do my job really well and, you know, and then also have time to invest in me. I can't do there's just not enough of me to go around. And I know that many of our listeners definitely feel like that. So it's having those open and honest conversations with your partner, with your family, and even with your children. You know, I've said to my son, who's getting of an older age now, you have to help. Like, you have to help mum, be responsible for your things. I'm not there to pick up after you constantly, so that we change some of that conditioning and that he gets used to being independent. It's really important about having boundaries for ourselves, isn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it's important to acknowledge what matters, because when you've got resources, when you've got time, it's great. I can do that and I'll do it better and I'll do it the right way and put everything in the way that it needs to be done. But when you're running low on resources, perhaps, you know, you're caring for an elderly relative, or things are really busy and stressful at work and you've had those deadlines, and something has to give. And it's about then, as you say, being honest with yourself, having that self-awareness and recognizing actually what really matters. You know, and when I can't do everything, when I don't have physically enough time in the day, what is most in line with my values and my purpose? What matters the most? Is it being here and playing with my child, or sitting with an elderly relative because they're lonely, or caring for them? Or is it that pile of laundry? You know, or is it having things, you know, ironed, or things at a certain level of cleanliness? What matters most? And I think it's having that self-awareness. It's about really understanding what your values are, what your sense of purpose is, what really matters when there's so much going on. Where do I need to focus my energy the most? And that can be a really good compass as to how we can direct our focus and our energy when we don't have enough to go around.
And letting go of the idea of perfection as well, because, you know, we know social media plays a massive part in this. You're seeing everybody's Instagram houses and like, oh, I'm doing this and this is perfect and this is fantastic, you know, and then you start going, oh my God, I'm not perfect and I'm not fantastic. And you've got to take the breaks as well. And you've got to see, I think, social media for what it is. You know, 9 times out of 10, it's a snapshot of like a highlight reel, or it's somebody's business account as well. You know, a lot of people now on Instagram are creating business accounts, and so you know yourself, you'd only put your best work out there. You're not going to show the shoddy bits, are you? You're going to like reflect yourself in the best way possible. And it's always to be mindful that actually, if you can feel that social media in particular is making you feel like you're not meeting a certain standard, shall we say, switch it off and come back to basics.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is such fantastic advice. Social media can be great. We know that, don't we? That sometimes it can be fulfilling, it can help you connect, but it's having that self-awareness. So I've been active on social media. How am I feeling now? Am I feeling energized, connected? Do I feel like I've got a sense of belonging from my community and my tribe? Or actually, do I feel not good enough, worthless, lacking? Am I continually comparing the worst of my insides with the best of everybody's outsides? You know, as a therapist, you get to hear everybody's inner fears, you know, inner secrets, and we're so similar. You know, we all share the same fears. We all share the same sort of hopes and dreams. We're all worried about not being loved, not being good enough, and the way that we compare ourselves with others. And social media is used, as you said, so differently by different people. And very often what you see really isn't what's happening on that person's inside either. So we have to be mindful. Like anything else, if it's making us feel more insecure, take a break or reconsider.
Yeah, and curate your feed, you know, if something's bothering you. And it's just, again, being mindful and being aware. Awareness, I think, is such a key word for everything that we're talking about, having that self-awareness. You know, going back to something that we touched on earlier was that the time of year that we're in. And I know that this is a big concern for a lot of our listeners. You know, when the clocks change, people start to feel like there's almost like an impending doom almost, and that it feels a very long and drawn out process before the light comes back. How can people deal with those feelings during this next 6 months?
Yeah, it's a huge worry. You know, a lot of people worry about their mental health during winter, and we've got different names for it, haven't we? We can talk about winter blues, winter depression, or at the most extreme end, something called seasonal affective disorder, where people are really debilitated. They get so worried because they know it's going to have an impact on their ability to work and live and just function in day-to-day life. But there are lots of things that we can do to sort of maintain our mental health during this period. I'd say the main one is make sure that you get outside as much as you can. Take advantage of that daylight when it's there. And actually getting outside can reap huge benefits, because number one, you're getting the light that you need to make up for the shortfall in light that we're getting in those shorter months. Number two, we've got the benefits of nature, which again, we know have got great mental health benefits. And if we think about how we go outside, we can also use that as an opportunity to connect with others. And we were saying before that that's so important. And also the opportunity to get active and stay active and keep moving, because that has got massive mood boosting impacts. So there's a lot that we can do to protect ourselves from the time that's coming, and to think about also what we can do to in the way that we eat, making sure that we keep a healthy diet. There's the urge when the nights draw in and when it's very dark for people that are affected by sort of a winter depression or a seasonal depression to hibernate. And to come with that comes a craving for carbs and really unhelpful foods that, again, we know is going to have an impact on our physical health and our well-being. So it's really important that we avoid the urge to just hibernate, eat loads of carbs, withdraw from people, and that we maintain those basics, keeping active, eating a healthy diet, making sure that we eat food that's going to give us a longer release of energy, things like vegetables, lots of fruit that aren't just going to give us that quick sugar release, and foods that are going to help to maintain our energy throughout the day.
I think as well, one thing that I've learned, like all of the things that you just said then are so helpful. And I've started now, because I know I'm one of those people that will start to go, oh gosh, I don't know how I feel about this. Like I do get that little bit of worry. But now when I walk my son to school every day, I'm making a point of walking him. I'm battling the cold. And it was a funny thing because, like obviously like we've heard of the Wim Hof method and how, the freeze the fear type thing, and how the cold can actually have an effect on your nervous system. So I've now and I said to my friend, we've got to make friends with the cold, because actually if we get out there, we'll get the daylight, the cold will reset our nervous system. And I don't know if there's any truth in this, but I definitely know it makes me feel better, and it does make me feel a bit more kind of reset. And I think that's the thing, is lots of people are afraid of the cold, aren't they, when really if you kind of make friends with it, it will invigorate you.
Yeah, I mean, lots of people talk about the benefits to themselves of, freshwater swimming, don't they? And cold water swimming. And lots of athletes use cold to regenerate their muscles. So that there is a lot of science around there that can say that that's helpful. But, we live in a cold country. Seasonal affective disorder and sort of winter depression affects people that live in those northern latitudes, and it can affect a lot of us. Sort of 1 in 15 people can be impacted by that. And it's more our relationship with the cold as well. So if we're already dreading winter, going, I can't bear it, I can't stand it, it's going to be horrible, our urge then is to, wrap up, stay inside, under the duvet. And those are the worst things that we can do for our mental health. It is about staying connected, maintaining a good routine, making sure that we keep active, and making sure that we can adapt to that weather system that we have, because we can't avoid it.
No, we can't. Exactly. Thank you. That was so helpful. And moving on now to another massive area which we're really passionate about here is the menopause and perimenopause, and how our mental health can be massively affected, during that time. We did a menopause special actually a couple of episodes ago, and the evidence that came out from that was the highest rate of suicide of women in the UK is between 45 and 54, which is that peri kind of menopausal age, and that's really worrying for a lot of women. What's your advice to women kind of entering that phase? And some people don't even know they're entering it, do they, with perimenopause?
Yeah, again, we're talking about it so much more, and I'm so pleased that it's been a topic on your show, and I'm so pleased it's something that you revisit, because up until so recently it has been completely taboo. And the menopause, it's the biggest change to a woman's body, identity, relationships, and sex life after childbirth. But when you think about childbirth, we talk about it, don't we? We prepare each other. We know that it's coming. We've got lots of rituals around it. We've got baby showers, and it's a topic of conversation that's there. And with the menopause, we're kind of late to the party, aren't we now, in terms of those conversations? And there's still a reluctance to talk about it. I said to just a friend of mine the other week that we'd been doing some research with the Manchester Metropolitan University on the menopause, and she's a bit younger than me, and she just went, "Oh, I'm not ready for that. I don't want to talk about it." And so what happens is we get blindsided. We come into perimenopause. We don't know what to expect. We haven't prepared for it. We haven't had those conversations in society, and it takes us by surprise. We're not prepared. And that actually can be really, really damaging for us, because we don't know what to expect, and we don't have the support that we need then, and it's much more difficult to ask for it once we're kind of there and experiencing symptoms.
I think it's really important, like what you just said then about speaking to your friend. I've been doing this loads, and I've talked about it all the time on this podcast. And even just last weekend, I was having a conversation with a few friends, and we had one friend who was a bit like, why are you putting me in that bracket? And another friend, I was saying, well, you need to go get some calcium, you need magnesium, you need this, you need that. Bless her, she went off and got it all. And she was like, look at me, I'm going to be fantastic soon. I was like, it's important.
Your friend will be protecting her bone health. She'll be protecting herself from osteoporosis. She'll be eating the foods that might sort of prepare for that depletion in estrogen. And also mentally, knowing that this is coming and knowing that this isn't something to be frightened of. But actually, there's still a sense that when we look at menopause, it's aging. It means that you're going to become less relevant. You're going to become invisible. And, some people talk about the chorus of yous. You're going to become unattractive, useless, unhappy, and unwanted. And if we're talking about menopause that way, no wonder we're dreading it. No wonder we're looking at it like that, going, I don't want to know, I don't want to know, I don't want to know, because it's not something that I want to look forward to. And actually, when we talk about menopause, we're still talking about the loss associated with it, a loss of hormones that lead to a loss of attraction, a loss of energy, a loss of ability to do our work. And we're not reframing that with actually what we can gain from it. So it's about being able to have conversations, prepare for the menopause, be really open and transparent so that we can get the support that we need for the symptoms that we're having. Because actually, it's not often the symptoms that are causing the difficulty, it's the lack of support and awareness around them. What causes women to think about leaving work, and it's huge, in the workplace. Our Healthier Nation Index at Nuffield Health, so we do this really comprehensive survey of people's health every year, and it showed that 76% of women don't feel comfortable talking about the menopause with their employers, and that's still. Davina McCall has done all of the work on the menopause. We've had lots of discussion about it. But when it translates into action, people are still really uncomfortable talking about it, which means that in the workplace, they can't get the support that they need. And actually, if we implement things like flexible working hours, different start times because I haven't been able to sleep, or I've had, night sweats, or I'm actually exhausted, that support can really help some of the most talented people in our workforce to stay at the top of their game, rather than thinking actually, like 1 in 10 women think about leaving their jobs.
Yeah, when we covered that, like in our special with Bloom, when we discussed their Bloom manifesto, and it was all the research that was in there as well. And as you say, it is about reframing the menopause, because so much of the feelings I think that women start to feel with the panic, I'm getting old, and as you said, I'm going to be invisible, oh my God, I can't do this anymore. That's all social conditioning. That's all coming at you. If we lived in a society where it's like, oh my gosh, you're the wise older person, you're so sexy, you're amazing, you know everything. If we treated women like that, we'd be all going, oh, I can't wait to get to that age. Can you believe it? But it's the way that we view it in society, and how, I love Davina. I think she's incredible, and obviously the work that she is doing to really change that perception. And I definitely feel like for younger women as well, we need to start talking about it much, much earlier, reframing it so that then we don't have those feelings of low self-worth, of low self-esteem, which, as you say, then can massively impact on the physical symptoms. Because when you see those physical symptoms happening, you start to go, oh gosh, there's a change, and then it all becomes into a massive cycle.
We call it the domino effect because it's how those symptoms interplay with each other. So actually, if you're not sleeping very well, then that impacts on your mood. When your mood is impacted, then you start to withdraw. You don't talk about things as much. When you don't talk about things as much and you're kind of keeping things to yourself, like we talked at the start, then it becomes much more burdensome and you're not getting the support that you need. And then you become much more stressed. How am I going to cope with my workload? I can't think, I can't concentrate, I'm going to lose my job, I'm just not able to do it anymore. That impacts on your ability to sleep. So we have all of these unhelpful cycles, often fueled by, not just our body symptoms, but the way that we're thinking, the way that we're talking to ourselves. And there's so much support that's available, the support that, in the form of HRT. We know that lifestyle changes that we have can make a huge difference to the way that we're experiencing those symptoms, but also stress, and when we're stressed, we produce more cortisol, and that can just exacerbate all of those physical symptoms. So by understanding what's happening to us, by reaching out for support, by reaching out for the expert help where you need it, we can make it a very different experience. And there's lots of really helpful guidance on a new menopause advice hub that we've launched at Nuffield Health. So again, if you can direct people to there, there's lots of hints and resources on helping to manage menopause and find out more about it.
One thing that I love as well is obviously that I found out, and that I know that Nuffield are amazing at within their fitness centres and gyms, is like strength training. Strength training is one of the best things for if you're perimenopausal, menopausal, to help maintain that muscle mass, to protect your bones, all of this incredible stuff. And I know that there's like programs out there if you go in and see one of the personal training team, or speak to a professional in there, you'll get that helpful advice of how to maintain that mass.
Absolutely. So when we can be honest about what's happening, we can get the guidance that we need. And it's understanding actually our bodies do change. Our hormones change during the menopause, and the activity that you did, in your 20s and 30s, or, when you're premenopausal, is going to be different to the kind of activities that you need when you're menopausal or perimenopausal. And actually compensating for the fact that we're going to lose muscle mass is one of those really helpful things that we can do. But we can't do that if we're not talking about it, if we're still embarrassed, if we still associate it with, all the worst aspects of aging, and kind of, the words that you hear some women use are things like shriveling and,
dried up,
shriveled, rather than seeing this as a potential period for real empowerment, for having real confidence, for using that wisdom, tapping into that self-awareness, being able to have more confidence to say what you were too frightened to say when you were younger, because you had that fear of speaking out, or that real sort of fear of judgment that you might lose with age and wisdom and experience. So being able to focus on those aspects and being open so that we can get either the medical support that we need, or the pelvic health support that we need, or the hormonal replacement therapy that we need, or the talking therapies that we need to make this an experience that's going to take us into this transition with confidence.
And I think as well, like you've just said then, it should be an incredible transition really, and we can be in the best shape of our lives, with the right people around us, be it by being honest. My husband's a PT, and I know with some of his female clients, it's something that he talks very frankly about. He talks about, women's cycles, menstrual cycles. It's really important that we know that stuff because of the way we train. It massively affects our training, and in certain weeks we won't be able to lift certain weights as heavy as perhaps like the week before. And once we know all that, we can tailor make our choices to fit into all that. But also, like, your professional, whether it's, like I said, a PT or a fitness advisor, they'll be able to help you go, right, these are the things that you need to do, and you can be in the best shape and feel the best that you've ever felt. You don't need to worry.
because there's not one menopause. Our understanding of the menopause is still really limited. We've got this research and we're talking about it, but the research that's been done has sadly been done on women that look like me, white women from a certain demographic. We're not looking at all women. We're not looking at all women from all backgrounds and all cultures. And actually, we've got different needs. Some women, need more pelvic health, and that's where, a physiotherapist can help you. Some women need more help with their hormones because that imbalance is there. That's where a GP can help you, and you can discuss the benefits and risks of hormone replacement therapy. Other people, it's the understanding what it means for them to transition, that sense of identity, who they are, what this means to them as a transition. So their talking therapies might work. And for somebody else, it's about, how do I keep fit? Because what I used to do isn't working. It's not working anymore, and I want to protect my heart health. I want to protect my muscle strength. I want to protect my bones. So how might that be impacted by the kind of workouts that I do? The support's there, but we could have all the support in the world out there if we're not able to talk about it. And that bit's still missing. There's still a real reluctance from some people, especially in the workplace, to be honest and transparent and to have that open conversation.
I think that's so important, and I think for me, this is exactly why I wanted this podcast to exist, so that we could have these conversations, so that it could spark a debate, or it could get women going, oh my gosh, I listened to this, and guess what? And that girl chat, that chit chat that we have, we talked about it in another episode a couple of weeks ago about the connection of friendships, the sisterhood, that connection of sharing stories and sharing experiences and not being afraid to do that. We've opened up kind of the chat around like mums, and when if you've suffered from postnatal depression, which I know lots of people have done in the past but never spoke about it, people that have suffered with mental health, and the menopause is just another one of those areas that we need to get that conversation going, and that honesty, and about being honest with yourself and being aware. I think those are the two biggest things that I'm going to definitely take away from today.
I think, it's so important as a sisterhood that we prepare each other for what we know is going to happen. And I think there's so much around women's reproductive health that we don't talk about. The menopause has been a big taboo. Miscarriage is another one. When that happens to so many women, it comes as such a shock. It comes as such a devastating experience that nobody's prepared for, because there's still parts that aren't talked about. But I like to think that we can get the misterhood sort of involved as well, because the more that men can feel comfortable talking about the menopause, the more that we've got that support all around. We've got a webinar on our Menopause Advice Hub with one of our younger therapists talking about it, not to mansplain, not to be the one that's there teaching women about the menopause, but to model actually that we can all talk about it. It doesn't have to be uncomfortable, because for too long we've had this double bind. We've had women or individuals experiencing the menopause feeling embarrassed. I don't know how to talk about it. What do I say? And we've had men going, oh, I don't know what to say back to you. So we've got this double silence. Yeah. And nothing happens. So if we can have those conversations across the board, that's where we can make changes. That's where we can support each other, because we've all got friends, brothers, sisters, daughters, aunties, mothers that are going to go through regular life transitions, and all of us being able to understand what that is and navigate around it is going to be essential for people to thrive. And that's what we want, isn't it? We don't just want to not be depressed or not be anxious. We want to create conditions in society where we're all given the potential to thrive and reach our full potential, because that's mental health. Mental health isn't just not having mental ill health. Mental health is actually having that real sense of psychological well-being, living a life aligned with your purpose and values, knowing yourself, being connected with other people, liking yourself. And we've got to create the conditions in which we can do that.
Oh gosh, that was such a lovely way to finish our chat today. We've had it's been brilliant. Thank you so much for being with me, and there's so much to take away in there. Thank you very, very much.
Absolute pleasure, Natalie. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh no, I honestly thank you. You just amazing advice, and I really hope that you guys at home as well have found our chat helpful. To find out more about Nuffield Health and the services they provide, please visit www.nuffieldhealth.com. For more wellbeing, fashion and beauty, you can visit us at our website as always at www.thecapsule.co.uk. You can also catch up with our previous podcast episodes by visiting the In Conversation page and subscribing to any of our podcast channels and YouTube. As always, I love hearing from you. Get those rates and reviews in. If you're not a subscriber yet, get subscribing, and also come and visit us on Instagram as well. You can leave us a DM there and get involved with our chat at Official Capsule. I will be back next week with another very special guest, but all that's left for us to say today is goodbye. So it's goodbye from Gosia.
Goodbye. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you, and goodbye from me. Bye-bye. This episode of the Capsule in Conversation was brought to you by Harrogate Spring Water. Bottled at source, Harrogate Spring offers a pure, refreshing taste with a delicate blend of naturally occurring minerals and electrolytes, perfect for healthy hydration. Healthy hydration. Healthy hydration. Health